So, in today's discussion, we are going to discuss geometric mean on right triangle. And is so saan niyo ginagawa yan? Sa ginagawa niyo yan kapag nakakita kayo ng kalbo tulad nito. So alam niyo ba na matagal na yan na every time makita tayo ng taong kalbo, kapag kasama natin mga friends natin, nagbibiroan tayo ng ganon, tayo ng pendong. But did you know na it's a sign of disrespect to that person na pinatutungkulan nyo nun? Diba? So parang ang dating sa kanya is that wala siyang karapatang maging ganun yung itsura ng buhok niya, ng ulo niya. So, parang ganun ang dating. Kapag sinabi natin, kapag pinansin natin yung mga tao na, more specifically, mga lalaki na ang gupit ay kalbo. Pero, other persons naman na kahit gawin mo yun sa kanila, they don't care. It's because they know for a fact, or they know exactly who they are. So alam nila kung sino sila, kahit ano ba mag-itsura nila, walang pakialam ang kahit sino man. So ganun din dapat yung thinking natin. So yung mga nangaasar sa atin, so alam natin na they are just doing that to annoy us. So don't mind them. So it's just a matter of lagi ko sinasabi sa inyo na accepting who you are. So, kung alam mo sa sarili mo kung sino ka, kahit ano pang sabihin ng iba, walang epekto yan because you know exactly who you are. So, ayun lang yung natin for that one. So, now, let's continue our discussion for the third grading period. We are now on lesson number 11. So, what are we going to discuss for lesson number 11? So, in today's discussion, we are going to discuss geometric mean on right triangle. So, what is it, this geometric mean on right triangle? Do you still remember when we discussed about different properties of proportion, particularly the last one, wherein tinatawag natin mean proportion? So, particularly, that formula that we formed there, that is basically what we are going to use in order for us to find out for the geometric mean on right triangle. So, as you can see, the involved triangle here is particularly, to be specific, is a right triangle. So, paano ba natin kinukuha yung geometric mean on right triangle? So, it is just like the square root of the two numbers. So we'll find out what are the two numbers that we are going to put inside the square root sign in a given right triangle. So we'll find out that in this lesson. So let's start it now. So let's start it with this given right triangle. So that's right triangle ABC with segment BD that intersects one side of the triangle, particularly the longest side of the triangle from the vertex B. So we come up with the segment BD. So from that given right triangle, still, the longest side in a right triangle, we're familiar already with that, we call that as hypotenuse. While the other two sides are the legs of that right triangle. Then that segment BD na makikita natin dyan, ayun naman yung tinatawag natin as the altitude. Now, with the help of this, so, matutulungan tayo on how are we going to apply yung geometric mean on right triangle. So, take note, the given triangle here is specifically a right triangle. When you draw a segment from the vertex uh, to the hypotenuse of that right triangle, so makaka-form ka rin tinatawag na altitude. Okay, paano ba ina-apply geometric mean on right triangle? So let's have this. So if you want to find out for the altitude of that right triangle, yung may pinakita natin kanina, what's the altitude there? Sabi dito, the altitude to the hypotenuse of a right triangle is the geometric mean between the segments into which it divides the hypotenuse. When we say geometric mean, it's just like the mean proportion or it's the square root of the two numbers. Ano yung two numbers na yon? It's the geometric mean between the segments into which it divides the hypotenuse. Di ba yung altitude na yun, if you are going to look at the figure, so that altitude is this. Ito yon. So that altitude, dinivide niya yung hypotenuse into two segments. So kung ano yung measure of that two segments, ayun yung measure, yun yung geometric mean of that altitude. Or yun yung sinasabi natin geometric mean of that given altitude. So paano? So let's take a look at these segments. Ang segments na meron tayo na hinati nung segment na to the hypotenuse is segment AD and segment CD. So for us to find out for the altitude or the geometric mean of the altitude, it will be BD. BD is the altitude, right? Then it will be equal to AD. It will be equal to the square root of AD times CD. Ano yung AD and CD that we are pertaining to there? Ayun yung segments into which it divides the hypotenuse. Diba yung altitude, dinivide yung hypotenuse into two segments. So yung two segments na yun, ayun yung nasa loob ng square root sign. So whatever the measure of that two segments, that will be inside the square root sign for us to find out for the geometric mean of BD or the altitude. Or for us to find out for the altitude of that given right triangle. So just by simply getting its geometric mean between the segments into which it divides the hypotenuse. While if we want to find out for the leg, so sabi dito, each leg of a right triangle is the geometric mean between the hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. Again, each leg of a right triangle is the geometric mean between the hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So, paano yon? Balik tayo dito. So, let's take, for example, we want to find out this leg. Gusto natin kunin yung measure of this leg. That's leg AB. Sabi ito, geometric mean daw yon ng hypotenuse, yung buong hypotenuse, and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. What do you mean by adjacent to the leg? Yung kasunod nung segment na kasunod nung leg na yon. Ito yung hinahanap nating leg. Ito yung hypotenuse natin na hinati into two by this segment BD. So kung ano yung segment na malapit to sa hinahanap nating leg, yun yung kailangan natin na kapartner nung buong measure ng hypotenuse for us to find out for the measure of AB. So it should be AB times this segment kasi ito yung adjacent to it. That is segment AD. So that's why if you want to find out for the leg AB, it should be equal to the square root of AC. Again, AC is the measure of the hypotenuse, while AD is the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So ayun yung how we find AB. Well, if we want to find out for the other leg, let's say for example, BC is what we are going to find. So gusto natin kunin yung measure of BC. So it's the hypotenuse, the measure of the hypotenuse, that is AC, square root of the measure of the hypotenuse, that would be AC, times the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg we are looking for. So that BC is what we are looking for. Ito naman yung segment or segment of the hypotenuse na adjacent to the leg we are looking for. That is segment CD. So that's why if we are going to find out for segment BC, it will be equal to the square root of AC. And then it's the hypotenuse, yung buong measure ng hypotenuse, times CD, or the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So, nakadepende kung ano, nakadepende doon sa hinahanap nating leg, kung ano yung magiging kapartner ng measure ng hypotenuse inside the square root sign. So, what we are going to do is to look at for the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg that we are looking for. So that's how we find for the leg. While for the altitude, it's just the square root of the hypotenuse or the segments of the hypotenuse to which it divides. Segment na dalawang segments of the hypotenuse na hinati nung altitude. So that's how we are going to find for the altitude. So para ma-apply natin yan, let's do that through examples. Let's have example number 1. So find the value of the variables. So as you can see, we do have here a given right triangle. And we have the altitude here from right angle, nag-intersect siya doon sa hypotenuse. So, hinati niya ngayon hypotenuse into 2 segments. So, this segment measures 16 while this segment measures 9. So, what we are going to do is to find for the value of x, y, and z. So, what are we going to do? So, we are going to make use now on the formula for finding the geometric mean of a right triangle. So, unahin natin yung solving for x. Ano ba yung x natin kanina? Yung x na to, yan yung tinatawag natin as the altitude. So again, x is what we call as the altitude. So to solve for x, which is the altitude, sabi natin, it's the geometric mean. The geometric mean between the segments to which the hypotenuse is cut by the segment of the altitude. So that is 16 and 9. So that 16 and 9 will be the one inside the square root sign. Diba, we already have an exercises about finding the mean proportion. So, ganun din yung gagawin natin dito. So, as you can see, both numbers inside the square root sign are perfect squares. So, what are we going to do is to simply get the root of it. So, square root of 16 is 4, while square root of 9 is 3. So, that will come up with 4 times 3. So, simplify it. 4 times 3 is equal to 12. So, therefore, the value of x is equal to 12, or the value of the altitude is equal to 12. Now, let's solve for the other variables. So, let's solve next for y. So, ito naman yon. This is what we are going to solve. So, to solve for y, sabi kanina doon sa statement, to solve for y, or to solve for the leg, so, it is the geometric mean between the hypotenuse, so yung buong measure of the hypotenuse, and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So, kung ito ang hinahanap mong leg, ito yung segment of the hypotenuse na adjacent to that leg. So, ang kailangan natin, ano ba yung measure ng buong hypotenuse? That would be 16 plus 9, that would be 25. And the segment of hypotenuse adjacent to that leg is 16. So, that will come up with y is equal to square root of 25 times 16. Again, sa nakuha yung 25, it's the measure of the hypotenuse, yung buo. The 16 plus 9, that would be 25. At yung 16, yun yung segment na kadikit nung hinahanap nating leg. So since y hinahanap nating leg, ito yung segment na kailangan natin. Wherein its measure is 16. Then simplify that. Again, both numbers are perfect squares. So just simply get its square root. We come up with square root of 25 is 5, while square root of 16 is 4. Then simplify that, we'll come up with the value of y which is equal to 20. So ibig sabihin, the measure of y is equal to 20. Did you get that? So let's try the next. So let's try to solve for y this time. So the other leg is what we are looking for. So the other leg is z. Yun. So since leg is what we are looking for, still it's the geometric mean between the hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. Itong hinanap na leg, yung buong hypotenuse measure nun is 25 and the segment, ito yon na malapit dito sa hinahanap nating leg. So that will come up with the equation as z is equal to the square root of 25 times 9. Then again, both of them are perfect squares. So just simply get the square root. Square root of 25 ay 5. Square root of 9 ay 3. So we come up with 5 times 3. And simplifying it, 5 times 3 is equal to 15. So therefore, z is equal to 15. So that's how we apply geometric mean on right triangle. You have any questions about example number 1? So if none, let's proceed to another example. Let's try example number 2. Again, we do have here another given right triangle with this segment from the vertex nag-intersect on the hypotenuse, then it divides the hypotenuse into 2 segments. So this segment measures 4 while this segment measures 32. So what we are looking for is to find for the value of m, n, and p. So let's try to find out first the value of m. So to solve for m, we know that m is the altitude. Diba? The altitude is the geometric mean of the segments to which the of geometric mean between the segments where the hypotenuse was being cut. So, eto yon, 32 and 4. So, these two numbers are the numbers inside the square root sign. So, that will come up with the equation m is equal to the square root of 4 times 32 dapat. So, since 32, alam na agad natin is not a perfect square. So, let's find out right away. Let's think of a way right away for us to simplify it. And 32 is, even though it's not a perfect square, but it has factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square other than 1. So that would be 16 times 2. In that way, 4 and 16 are perfect squares. Then 2 is not a perfect square anymore. And wala na siyang factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square other than 1. Just like yung how we simplify radicals, kapag ganun yung case, so we leave that number inside the radical sign. So ang purpose natin is to bring out those numbers which are perfect root. So ganun yung ginawa natin on this part. So, syempre, when we write the numbers, unahin natin isulat yung number na perfect square kapag ganito yung case natin. So, if you're going to look at the number 4 and 32, so on both numbers, 4 is a perfect square. That's why we write 4 first. Then, sinunod natin yung 32 wherein it's not a perfect square, but it has factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square, which is 16 times 2. Then simplify that. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 16 is 4. So magkakaroon tayo ng square root of 4 ay 2. Square root of 16 ay 4. Then 2 will be left inside the square root sign. Then simply simplify 2 times 4 here. We'll come up with 8 square root of 2. So that's what will happen. So the value of m, which is the altitude, is 8 square root of 2. So did you get that? So next, let's try to solve for n. So to solve for n, ibig sabihin ito yon, this leg. So if we're going to solve for this leg, it's it's this, it's the geometric mean between the hypotenuse and the segment adjacent to that leg, which is this segment. That's why, if we are going to form our equation, yung buong hypotenuse, what's the measure of the whole hypotenuse? That would be 32 plus 4 will come up with 36. So it should be n is equal to the square root of 36 times 4. So wala tayong finactor, it's because both numbers are perfect squares. 32 plus 4, that would be 36. Then the segment adjacent to that leg is 4. So that's 36 times 4. Since both of them are perfect squares, just simply get its square root. Square root of 36 ay 6, while the square root of 4 is 2. So we'll come up with 6 times 2. Then simplify it. 6 times 2 is equal to 12. So the value of n is equal to 12. Now, isa na lang kailangan natin kunin. That is to solve for p. So ito namang side na to yon. So if we're going to solve for the value of p, or this side, it's the measure of the hypotenuse, it's the geometric mean rather of the hypotenuse, and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So ito yon, yung 32. Ito yung segment adjacent to this leg. So that will come up with the equation. Since 32 is not a perfect square, so we'll apply just like what we have applied on solving for n. In 32, ipapactor na agad natin siya as 16 times 2. So that's why we'll come up with the square root of 36 times 16 times 2. Because 36, it's the measure of the hypotenuse. So simplify that. 36 and 16 are both perfect squares. So let's find the square root of it. Square root of 36 is 6. Well, the square root of 16 is 4. So we'll come up with 6 times 4. Then 2 there will be left inside the square root sign. Then simplify. 6 times 4, that would be equal to 24. Then attach square root of 2. So the value of p is 24 square root of 2. So nakuha yung example number 2. So if not yet, let's try another example. We have here example number 3. Again, you are going to find the value of the variables. Meron agad tayong given dito na right triangle na given na yung measure ng altitude. That altitude, natin niya yung hypotenuse into 2 segments. So this segment measures 36, ito naman ay R. This time, given yung measure of the altitude. So what we are going to find out is the value of R, S, and V. So hindi natin makukuha yung measure ng V and S if we don't know yet the measure of R. Kasi kailangan yung measure ng buong hypotenuse para makuha mo yung measure of the leg, di ba? So that's why you have to get first the measure of the other segment of the hypotenuse. So paano kinukuha yon? So, syempre, gagamitin din natin yung formula on finding the altitude. So to solve for R first, so the formula for finding the altitude is the altitude equal to the square root of the two numbers, di ba? Ito daw measure nito is equal to the geometric mean between the segments of this hypotenuse. So that would be 36 and R, kaya 36 times R yon. Since R is what we are looking for and 18 yon yung value ng altitude, so we have to simplify it first to find out for the value of R. So as you can see, 36 is a perfect square. Right? So we can come up with the square root of it. Square root of 36 ay 6. So magkakaroon tayo ng 18 is equal to 6 square root of R. R na lang matitira inside. Then, para matanggal yung numerator na to na 6, we have to divide both sides of the equation by 6. So, ang matitira natin doon ay square root of R is equal to 3. Tama? Because 18 divided by 6 yon. So, divide natin both sides by 6. Matitira na lang dito sa kabila ay square root of R. Ito na yon, inayos na natin, is equal to 18 divided by 6. That would be 3. Then since R is what we are looking for and meron pa siyang square root sign, we have to remove that square root sign. by getting the square of both sides of the equation. So square the square root of r, square mo rin yung 3. So by getting the square of the square root of r, so the square and the square root sign will be eliminated, though matitira lang ay r. Then on the other side, that's 3 squared. Using 3 squared. What is 3 squared? That would be 3 times 3, which is equal to 9. So the value of r is 9. So therefore, r here is equal to 9. So that gives us an idea now on finding for the value of s and v. So we can do it already. So let's solve next for s. So to solve for s, so ito, this side is what we are looking for. Sabi doon, yung measure ng leg is the geometric mean between the hypotenuse and the segments of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. So, hypotenuse yung buo. Ano bang measure ng buo? Ang buo ay 36 plus 9. And what is 36 plus 9? That would be equal to 45. Then, segments of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. Since this is the leg that we are looking for, so we need this value, which is 36. So as you can see, 36 is a perfect square while 45 is not. Pero yung 45 ba may factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square? So the answer is yes. What would be the right factors for 45? So it should be 9 times 5. So that's why makaka-form tayo ng equation na s is equal to the square root of 36, which is a perfect square. Then factors of 45, wherein one of its factor is perfect square, which is 9 times 5. So here, both 36 and 9 are perfect squares. So we can come up with its root. Square root ng 36 ay 6, square root ng 9 ay 3. And 5 will be left inside the square root sign. Then simplify, we come up with 6 times 3. That would be 18, then attach square root of 5. So therefore, the value of s is 18 square root of 5. So yun yung value of this. Next, let's solve for v. Ito naman yung hinahanap natin. So wala tayong problema. It's because we already know the measure of the hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. Kung measure ng hypotenuse, alam natin na 45 yon. While this segment adjacent to the leg v is equal to 9. So ngayon, gagamitin na natin yon. Since 9 is a perfect square and 45 is not, and but 45 is the same way solving for s, na ang 45 may factors where in one of its factors is a perfect square. And that would be 9 times 5. So that will come up with v is equal to 9. Ayun yung measure ng r times 9 times 5, the measure of the hypotenuse. 36 plus 9. That would be 45. So, pinactor na natin siya because it has factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square. So, both 9 are perfect squares. So, both ang square roots nila ay 3 and 3. So, we come up with 3 times 3, then 5 will be left inside the square root sign. Then simplify, 3 times 3 will come up with 9, then attach square root of 5. So, that will come up with the value of v is equal to 9 square root of 5. So that's how we answer example number 3. Any question? So let's try more examples. Let's try example number 4. So here again, you are going to find the value of the variables. So given a measure of the segments cut by that altitude, segments of the hypotenuse rather, that's 36 and 27. Then, what we are looking for is B, C, and D. So let's try to find first the value of C. Unahin na natin altitude even though it's denoted by small letter C. So, but pwede naman nating unahin din yung B because since given naman na yung segments of the hypotenuse, magagawa naman na natin yun. O yung buong measure ng hypotenuse, maalalaman din natin. But let's try to solve first for the altitude. So since altitude is not yet given there, so let's try to solve for altitude first, which is the C. So the altitude makukuha natin is by getting the geometric mean of the two segments ng hypotenuse. Yung nahating two segments na yung hypotenuse. So geometric mean of that would be 36 and 27. So in the two, 36 is a perfect square but 27 is not. But 27 has factors. Ang isang factor niya ay perfect square. And that is 9 times 3. So that's why makaka-form tayo ng equation na C is equal to the square root of 36. Ito yon times 27 na pinactor natin na 9 times 3 na isang factor which is 9 is a perfect square. Then, find the root of those perfect square. 36, square root niya ay 6. 9 square root ay 3. So that will come up with 6 times 3. Then 3 will be left inside the square root sign, maging square root of 3. Then simplify 6 times 3 will come up with 18. Then attach square root of 3. So that the value of the altitude is equal to 18 square root of 3. Did you get that? Next, let's solve for B. B is the leg. Ito yun. B is the leg. So what we are looking for is this. So to solve for B, what we are going to do is it's the geometric mean between the hypotenuse, the measure of the whole hypotenuse. What would be the measure of the hypotenuse? That would be 63. And the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg, which is 27. Ito yung segment ng hypotenuse na malapit dito sa hinahanap nating leg. Or nakadikit doon. So 36 plus 27, that would be 63 and 27. So both are non-perfect squares. But both has factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square. So that's why we have to factor it right away when we write the equation. So that will come up with B is equal to 9 times 7 for the factors of the hypotenuse. That would be 63. And 9 times 3 for the factors of 27, which is 9 times 3. So both 9 are perfect squares. Pag kinuha natin square root nun, both are 3. We do have 3 times 3, then 7 and 3 ang may iwan inside the square root sign. So multiply that, we come up with 21. And 21 does not have factors already, wherein one of its factors is a perfect square other than 1. So it will stay as it is. So that would be square root of 21. So what we are going to do is just simplify 3 times 3 na lang. So we'll come up with 3 times 3, which is 9, and attach square root of 21. So that will find out for the value of B, which is equal to 9 square root of 21. So that's how we answer for the value of B. Let's solve for the value of D. To solve for D, ito naman yon yung leg na to. So, buong hypotenuse and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to this leg. Ito yun. Measures 36. 36 is a perfect square. So, ang kailangan na natin i-factor yung buong hypotenuse, which is 63. So, alam natin ang factor niya ay 9 times 7. So, that will come up with the equation as D is equal to the square root of 36 times 9 times 7. Both 36 and 9 are perfect squares. So that will get its root. Square root ng 36 ay 6. Ang 9 ay 3. So that will have 6 times 3 square root of 7 because 7 will be left inside the square root sign. Then simplify 6 times 3 will come up with 18. Then attach square root of 7. So that the value of D is equal to 18 square root of 7. Did you get example number 4? So let's try another example. Let's have example number 5. So find the value of the variables again. So the given variables here are I, G, and P. With the given measures for the segments of the hypotenuse as 90 and 48. So let's try to solve it now. So unahin natin solving for the altitude. So the altitude is the I. So that would be to solve for I. So it will be the geometric mean of the segments of the hypotenuse. So that would be 90 and 48. Both 90 and 48 are non-perfect squares. Hindi sila parehas na perfect squares. So just like what we did on the last example, so we are going to factor it right away wherein one of its factor is a perfect square. Ano yung sa 9? That would be 9 times 10. Ano yung sa 48? That would be 16 times 3. So we'll come up with I, which is equal to the square root of 9 times 10 times 16 times 3. Okay? So both 9 and 16 are perfect squares. So the square root of 9 is 3, while the square root of 16 is 4. So that will come up with 3 times 4, then 10 and 3 will be left inside. So just simply multiply them. 10 times 3 will come up with 30. So simplify 3 times 4 here. So 3 times 4 is equal to 12. Then attach 30. Because 30 does not have any more factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square other than 1. So it will stay as it is. So the value of I now is equal to 12 square root of 30. Did you get that? So next, let's solve for G. So ito naman ang hinahanap natin. Let's solve for this value of G. So since leg is what we are looking for, value ng hypotenuse, yung buo, and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg. That is 48. So both are non-perfect squares kasi 90 plus 48, that would be 138. Yung 138 ba yung factors wherein one of its factors a perfect square? If I'm not mistaken, wala. Pero yung 48 meron. So that's why makaka-form tayo ng 16 times 3. G is equal to the square root of 16 times 3 times 138. Again, 138, wala siyang factors other than 1. When one of its factors is a perfect square. Okay, so ang isa lang factor natin dyan ay 16. 16 lang yung perfect square. So we just have to get the square root of 16. So square root ng 16 ay 4. Then multiply natin yung 138 times 3. So ano ba yung 138 times 3? So, sige nga. That would be 400. What's that? 414. So if I'm not mistaken, that would be equal to 414. That would be the measure, that would be 138 times. But 414 now already has factors where one of its factor is a perfect square. So if a factor na rin kaagad natin siya. So after getting the square root of 4, so factor naman natin 414 wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. And that would be 9 times 46. Una, yung 138 is walang factor. Walang factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. But when we multiply it by 3, nagkaroon na siya ng factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. And that would be 9 times 46. Ano ba yung 9 times 46? Diba? 9 times 6 is 54. Carry 5. So 9 times 4 is 36. Plus 5, that would be 41. That would be 414. Diba? So, tama yung factors natin. Then 46 does not have any more factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square other than 1. So simplify natin yung square root ng 9, that would be 3. So we come up now with G is equal to 4 times 3 square root of 46. Simplify 4 times 3, we'll come up with 12, then attach square root of 46. So that will come up with the value of G, which is equal to 12 square root of 46. So that's how we answer example number 5 to solve for G. Now let's solve for P. P naman hinahanap natin. Ito naman yon. So the measure of this leg or this leg of the triangle is the geometric mean between the hypotenuse, yung 138 yon, and the segment of the hypotenuse adjacent to the leg, that is 90. Diba? So that would be, we know that 138 does not have factors. Diba? 90 has factors, that would be 9 times 10. So we come up with P is equal to the square root of 9 times 10 times 138. Hey, 9 is a perfect square. So if you're going to find the root of it, that would be 3. Then 138 times 10 na may iwan inside. 138 times 10 is 1,380. Yung 1,380 now already has factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. And what would be that? That would be 4 times 345. So una, yung 138 again, wala siyang factor wherein one of its factors is a perfect square. But when you multiply it by 10, kasi sila na lang naiwan inside the square root sign, yung 1,380 already has now a factor or factors wherein one of its factors is a perfect square, and that would be 4 times 345. And 345 now do not have any more factors wherein one of its factor is a perfect square. So that's why square root na lang natin yung 4, square root ng 4 ay 2. So magkakaroon tayo ng P is equal to 3 times 2 square root of 345. So simplify na lang natin 3 times 2, magkakaroon tayo ng 6, then attach square root of 345. That's why we come up with the value of P, which is equal to 6 square root of 345. So did you get example number 5? May tanong. So if there are no more questions, that would be all for today. Goodbye, class!